Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. This is episode 240 with Dan Prosser and Andrew Frankel. This week, it's all about an icon. So the first icons episode we did was the Mazda MX-5.
Yeah.
Then we did the Porsche 911 Turbo.
Uh-huh.
Now we're doing BMW M3.
Yeah.
Proper icon.
Yeah.
It really is. We'll come on to the M3 in a moment, though. I'm just going to very briefly remind you all that podcast listeners can subscribe to the Intercooler app and website for 15% off. It's the best way to support the show, and that subscription gets you full access to our online, ad-free, multi-award-winning car magazine that people who subscribe seem to really like. So head to the-intercooler.com, find the subscribe page, and at checkout, use the coupon code POD15 to get 15% off. Please do that. We appreciate it. Lots of you have done so already, and we are going to keep reminding you because it's really important. Now,
hang on. Just on that point, I would just like to add, maybe even reiterate, that if you don't know about the app and the website, it is the place where the greatest assortment of people of any kind writing about cars gather in the world, be they journalists like us or designers or engineers. And we say this most weeks on the podcast, but what we know is that people who find us, have a look at the website and the app and decide to subscribe, they stay. Overwhelmingly, people are glad they have gone through that process.
Yep.
We have retention figures that most other people would kill to have. And it's because we do stuff every single working day that you really won't find anywhere else. And it's not just that, it's that the best writers in the field around at the moment are doing it. So please do just take a minute, check it out, see what you think, take out a free trial. So there's absolutely no comeback on you. And if you take advantage of the discount, then you'll have 15% off too.
yeah, for life.
For life.
Okay, so BMW M3. Now, I think this is one of those model designations, right? And I'm not talking about a model generally. So a 911 is a model that has cut through. I think the M3 is one of the few model designations that has cut through beyond an enthusiast audience. I think that if you walked up to someone on the street and said, do you know what a BMW M3 is? A lot of people would have an idea that it's a desirable, faster, more expensive BMW. I think it's one of those cars that sort of transcends our little nerdy world and people understand what it is.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. It's been around for long enough, hasn't it?
Yeah.
1986,
It landed the same year I did.
Is that right?
Mm.
Okay. Not the same year I did.
Not quite.
Not quite. Anyway, yeah, I think that is fair enough. I think it is. What other car names?
Well, M5 might, but what are the other ones? So C63 probably confuses people.
I don't think X6 has.
Ooh, no. No.
X6M.
I think M3 is one of the few that does, which is it's sort of testament to the fact that, well, A, it's been around for a long time, but it's also really highly regarded by people who do know about cars.
Yes.
And there have been sort of highs and lows, and we'll come on to those. But it's one of the models that we get excited about, and when there's a new one coming, people really pay attention.
Yeah.
It's an icon. That's why we're talking about it. So yeah, 1986, the first one arrived. E30.
Well, yeah. Can we just wind it back a little further, even than that?
You want some context?
I want a bit of context. So where did this come from? So basically, the whole. If you want to go right back, it goes back to the trouble that BMW found itself in at the end of the 1950s and then 1960s, where they found themselves making two sorts of cars. A really expensive thing called the 507, which was unbelievably expensive and nobody wanted, or little bubble cars, in which there was no money
Is
at all.
that what they were making?
Yeah, absolutely. There was no money at all. And BMW was going down the tubes, and something had to be done. And so I think it was 1962, they produced a thing called the Neue Klasse, the new BMW.
Yep.
And there's another one coming next year,
Yep.
which is going to define the future of BMW. So I'm going to watch that particular thing with great interest. Anyway, so this new car came along, and it was a sort of mid-sized family saloon, but beautifully built, quite good fun to drive, and it saved BMW. Spool forward another 10 years, and that car has now become the BMW, 1971 came out, the 2002 Tii, which was, I guess you could say that was the car that sired the M3 spiritually. It was a 130 horsepower 2-litre car, which actually in the early 1970s was a lot of power to have out of the thing, and it was really good fun to drive. 2-litre fuel injected engine, very rare to have an injection on a car like that in those days. Did 120 miles an hour, and this was a proper usable family, but nevertheless high performance, great fun car. That in turn spawned the bonkers 2002 Turbo. 1974, the first turbocharged production car, not a success, because 170 horsepower doesn't sound like anything, does it? I mean, at the time that was just oh my god, that's just off the scale. That's just ridiculous. My father had one for a very short period of time and absolutely hated it, largely because it would just blow up all the time.
Oh God!
Well, I say it would blow up. I mean, the engine itself was fairly strong, but it was just always going wrong. And it had this boost gauge on it, which had a big arc of nothing on it at one end and a big arc of red on the other end of it. And between the two parts, there was this tiny, tiny little green patch. And only when if the needle was in the red, that was really bad news. Yeah. If the needle wasn't in the green, if the needle was below the green, then it was actually providing less performance than the normal car would have done. And only when it got into that tiny little zone was it actually doing anything meaningful. But of course, we as kids thought it was all tremendously exciting, but I don't think it was a terribly good car. It's probably most famous for having the word turbo in reverse lettering on its front spoiler. So when you looked in the mirror, you knew what was coming up. You knew it was a turbo.
Like an ambulance.
Like an ambulance, precisely. And I think it was, the E30 then came along, and of course the E30 M3 was actually created for different reasons. They needed to homologate a racing car. But I think that's where the idea of the really high performance compact BMW came from.
Of course, the E30 wasn't the first 3 Series.
No.
21?
Yes, exactly.
There wasn't any kind of performance derivative, was there?
Well, there wasn't. So one of my favourite cars, actually, a 323i.
Okay.
143 horsepower. But, that was sufficiently performance oriented. And you're trying to find another kind of car like that at the time which would do this. Or even today, a slipper was an option. Short box was an option.
Okay. Yeah, that's a performance car, I guess.
Yeah, my mother had a boyfriend who had one. I'm sure I mentioned this before.
Yeah, you did.
Who had one who didn't have either the slipper or the short box in it. So I very soon lost interest in him. So yes. I mean, absolutely. It's probably remiss of me not to mention that as well. But actually, as I said, the M3 came along simply through a requirement to build 5,000 cars to homologate a car to go racing in the DTM.
Proper homologation special, born out of racing. It's not it wasn't a marketing exercise.
No,
not as much as a proper racing exercise.
No,
and of course, the E30 M3 is one of the most successful touring cars ever. I counted 25 national or international touring car championships to its name. 5
Nürburgring 24 hours.
Yeah.
4 Spa 24 hours.
Yeah. Formidable car. Also a very good tarmac rally car.
Yes, absolutely.
It won Tour de Corse, I think.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
Who's that? You'll know this. Who's that nutter? You go on YouTube now and you want to watch
Patrick Schneers.
Patrick Schneers.
On the
Go
Manx.
and do that. Yeah.
On the Manx, yeah. So
it's fantastic.
I have driven an E30 M3 rally car, tarmac rally car.
Wow, I would love to do that.
Sadly not on the Manx, but it was just incredible.
Yeah.
Actually, I can say this because he doesn't keep it a secret, but Chris Harris's E30 M3 rally car is in a unit just around the corner from our studio.
Yes.
And it's up on the ramp, and it's an old car showroom, so it's got big glass
windows.
Well, I suppose they are windows, yes. But you can see right into it, and you can see his E30 rally car up on the ramp, and it looks fantastic. I haven't driven that one, but I've driven another one. Phenomenal car, still with a 4-cylinder, but up to sort of 300 horsepower or something.
Wow.
And goodness me, that is a hell of an engine.
Yeah.
But yes, the E30 M3, the competition cars were outrageous things.
Yeah.
And we, just this week, we had a go in a lovely example of an E30 M3 road car, a Ravaglia, one of 25, just for the UK market, and it's based on the Evo 2. So to keep the E30 M3 touring car competitive, they did these updates each year, and so they had to homologate a new road car.
Yes.
So hence the Evolution 1, the Evolution 2, the Sport Evo with a 2.5 litre engine.
Yeah.
So this Ravaglia that we drove was based on the Evo 2. So but with a cat, so 215 brake horsepower.
I suppose 220. Yes.
Yeah, but it was a lovely thing, that wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful car. And you know what the really weird thing is that I haven't sat in one of those. I couldn't tell you how many years it's been since I sat in one of those things. I didn't have to look at anything. I can remember driving along, and we were. I don't know why we were doing. We were doing some kind of shot somewhere, and I suddenly thought we were doing an interior driving shot. That's right. And I just thought it'd be quite nice to have some lights on the dash. And I thought, well, how do I A, turn the lights on, and then B, turn up the rear stat on the dash? And my left hand just went out and pulled the knob and turned it.
Oh.
And I just knew how to do it.
Muscle memory.
And yeah, but that to me is a mark of a car that stayed with you. It's just lived on in your mind. And I think maybe we should talk a little bit about how different an M3 is to any other 3 Series of that generation. Because, you know, I love an E30, a 325i.
Yeah, nice thing.
325i Touring is a lovely, lovely car. But the E30, it was so different. And when you drive, as we did this week, you drive a sort of just a standard E30 M3 road car, you feel instantly how different it is. Everything about the car, really. I think in terms of body panels, I think it's the bonnet and the boot lid, something like that, are the only ones it's got in common with the standard car. The shell was different. And of course, you know, I think one of the strange things about it, that people look at it and they think, well, hang on, you know, if they had a 2.5 litre 6-cylinder engine in a 325i, why did they decide to make a 2.3 litre 4-cylinder engine to go racing with? And really, the answer was that 4-cylinder engine was so strong. It was short, it was stiff, it was strong. You could spin it to 9,000 RPM. You could get huge power out of it. They never went bang. It was just a much better racing engine.
Yeah, it's the S14, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is a great engine.
Yeah.
And in the road car, the owner kept saying, you have to rev it. Just remember, you have to rev it. And you do to get the performance out of it. And even then, it's not sort of blistering. But this is a late 1980s car. And it still goes well.
Yeah, and you know, and as we were remarking to each other when we were doing it, actually, there is such pleasure in being able to put your foot on the floor in a gear and just leave it there for a bit.
Yeah.
And just hear an engine, a naturally aspirated engine, a highly tuned naturally aspirated engine, which inevitably has, you know, characteristics, phases in the performance that it delivers, where the car is delivering different levels of torque, and you can feel it climbing onto the cam. And at about 4,800 in that car, from there until 70, that's when it really lets rip. And you've got to keep it in that sort of, you know, 5 to 7 bracket. But because you're not going that fast, you're not worried about, you know, doing antisocial speeds or pissing off the locals or getting into an area where, you know, the car is traveling dangerously fast. And I just loved savouring the performance and listening to the car, and feeling just the nuanced way in which it delivers its power. I mean, we live in an age of instant gratification, don't we? Where it's all just wham, bam, huge amounts of torque, bang, gear change, bang, gear change.
If there's any of those.
If there's indeed any of those, I shall refer you to our EV episode we didn't mean to do. So it's and when you have an engine of such innate quality, which is so good to listen to, and which has such great response, such fantastic throttle response, there's no, and the fact you're not actually traveling very fast, to me, is a bonus, because it just means you get to do it for longer. And who cares if the scenery isn't coming past like Star Wars? Just doesn't bother me. It's a fantastic, and you've got things like that, you know, that wonderful Getrag 5-speed dogleg gearbox, where first is the gear that's out on a limb, not fifth, which is, you know, it's the way that all Ferraris used to be. It's the way all racing cars, you know, used to be. You go and drive any old 70s Formula One car. They're all like that.
The point being, you only use first to get the car rolling, really, and then it's out of the way.
Exactly. Yeah, and you use fourth and fifth all the time, so you don't want to be having to go across gate because you're much more likely to wrong slot. Yeah. It's that sort of level of thinking. The suspension on them was completely different. They are such dramatically different cars. And if you drive one, it's quite difficult to sit here in a studio in Bristol and just try to explain the magic of it, because it's one of those things that you'll know it when you feel it.
Yeah.
And they just feel right. They just kind of want to be your friend. They kind of invite you to join in the fun. And it's just such a a wonderful sensory experience in the way that the car looks and the way that it sounds and the way that it feels. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and there will be a full written story about that car and a competitor, I suppose, coming soon, and a video as well coming soon to the Intercooler's YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
So look out for those. So that's the E30. They are very valuable cars now. It wasn't that, well, maybe it was 5-10 years ago that you could probably pick one up for 30 grand or something.
I can remember I wrote something about them 3 years ago, so in 2021 as we're recording this now. And I said the absolute top dollar was 60 for one of those.
Yeah, that's gone.
That was 3 years ago.
Yeah, six-figure cars now, a really nice
Six-figure night, really, really nice low-mile cars without any problems, and and that's not, Sport Evo 2.5 litre cars.
No,
that's a 2.3 litre standard M3.
Mm.
If you want one of those, 150.
Is it really?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. If you want a 2.5 Sport Evo, absolutely, it's a 150 grand car.
They really have gone nuts, haven't
Yeah.
they? And that might be why I sense that people are sort of reappraising the E30 M3 nowadays, because it's held up to be this icon, this performance icon. We're discussing it as one right now. But maybe there are people out there who think, well, if you've got to spend six figures, there are 1,000 different ways I'd spend that money for a better driving experience.
I think these days, I think, what I mean is I'm kind of transposing my own thoughts on this imposing my own thoughts onto everybody else. But I think what people crave, what I hope people crave these days, is authenticity. In this era, in this life we live in, where perception is, appears to be more important than reality. You get a car like that, which not only does what it does and looks the way that it does, but it's actually the very reason for its existence is to race.
Yeah.
And that it then became such an astonishingly successful racing car. You look at an E30 M3 and you just think proper motor car, proper car.
Yeah.
In a way that any number of cars, which are might be so much faster and probably available for so much less money, they just don't have that pedigree. That's what it is. It's heritage. And I think that stuff really counts now. And I think that increasingly people, because it's so different to everything else that's out there now, I think people really covet that. I think that, I'm sure that is what reflects, that is the reason for that price. And yes, even more than what the car actually does. Yeah. Is where it came from.
But it's a lovely thing. Really, really sweet to drive.
Compare the price of that to any other of the later M3s. There's just no comparison at all.
Yeah. So the E36 followed it in 1992.
Yes. I rather wish it hadn't.
Bigger car, not a homologation special.
Yeah.
6 cylinders, more power, more weight, up by 250 kilograms.
Yeah. But not a homologation special.
No. The 3 litre car produced...
Softer.
Yeah. 282 horsepower, the 3 litre car.
Yeah.
316, the later 3.2.
Yeah. The later 3.2 was a lot better. More power, 6-speed gearbox was important. I can remember when I went on the launch of the original one, which was in Mallorca, where you've been recently.
Yeah.
And there were cars being crashed left, right, and centre. It's just one of those islands. It's still got really slippery surfaces, those sort of highly polished surfaces.
It does actually, yeah.
Yeah. And so there were sort of M3s hanging out of trees and goodness knows what. But anyway, over dinner, I sat next to, I can't remember who it was though, whoever was, the man, the poor sap that BMW put forward to represent BMW in front of the UK press at this thing. And I turned around and said, wouldn't it be more honest to have called it a 330 CSI? Didn't go down very well. But that's what it felt like to me. And actually, I don't think a 330 CSI would have been in any way an unworthy car.
The thing is...
It felt like a touring car.
Yeah.
A GT.
Yeah.
Not an out-and-out sports car,
Yeah.
which the E30 was clearly.
But this is the point about authenticity, isn't it? And from BMW's point of view, of course you call it M3 because there's a huge marketing opportunity
Obviously.
To be had.
Yeah.
But when you talk about purpose, I mean, it just doesn't merit comparison to the E30.
No, but having built the brand in one car, you create the E30 M3, and at the end of that, suddenly the whole way that BMW is perceived changes. You just think, okay, so now where's the money? You spend an awful lot less on development. You don't do a bespoke shell because that's really stupid. You don't do a bespoke engine. You don't do a bespoke gearbox. You just get, one of your nice 6-cylinder engines. You turn it up to 11. I sound slightly disparaging here because clearly the E36 M3 is a very different car to any other E36. but it just didn't need, because it wasn't required to go racing, anything like that level of modification. And at the end of it was a result, actually, that was a far more powerful car, a much faster car, a much more comfortable car, a much more usable car, a car, the kind of car that many more people would actually want to go out and buy, and duly did.
Yeah.
Another thing we should have mentioned about the E30 M3 is left-hand drive only. It's the only ever left-hand drive.
Yeah, I think very
M3.
few, a very small number were converted in period to right-hand drive.
Yeah.
Very, very small.
But it was
number.
never sold as such.
No, they're all built left-hand drive,
Yeah. Yeah.
And also the E36 was available as a saloon.
Which was actually much better than, I can never understand this, but I mean, I did do this exact experiment. We had two, I can't remember where we were. I think we might have been at the I think we were at the Miraval test track doing a tyre test, which is near Montpellier in the south of France. Goodyear have a big track there. And I know it's all coming back to me. We had two M3s down there because we had so many tests we needed to do. We just thought we needed two cars. So we just said to BMW, can we have two M3s? And they went, yeah. And they turned up. And one happened to have four doors and the other didn't. And so we were able to do, back-to-back comparisons. And in all regards, the four-door car was nicer. Now, you would think, wouldn't you, that it would be worse because it would be heavier, because it would be less structurally rigid. I don't really know why. But if I was minded to buy an E36 M3, if you could find a saloon, and I bet you they're really rare, but that's definitely the one to have. I think that would be quite a gun car to have, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think it's one of those cars that if people, those who know.
I had a E36 318 IS.
Good car.
For a little while. Yeah, mine wasn't. But it's but I totally get it because it's a cool looking thing. You can feel the potential in the chassis. Mine was knackered, so it wasn't very good. But yeah, I totally get the appeal of an M3 of that era. So moving on then, 2000 E46.
We spent a bit less time talking about the E36 than we did about the E30.
Rather less, yes. Let's move it on anyway. Do you know what? The E46, I think, and without going back and listening to confirm this, I think we declared it the greatest M car of all time a while ago.
Did we do that, or did we poll the audience? Or
I think we did.
Yeah.
Actually, I think you did.
Did I? Ooh. Better than M3. Better than E30 M3. I imagine we were looking at from sort of all directions, including sort of affordability.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and usability nowadays.
And usability. Oh, I love that thing.
Yeah. So this is it had the S54 engine, 3.2 litre, 338 brake horsepower.
Yeah.
Looks fantastic. It was only coupe or cab.
Rev to 8,000.
Yeah. I've not driven many, but I've driven a few, and they're cool cars.
I think it had a very early electronically controlled mechanical diff in it as well.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that is right.
You could do anything with those.
They start at about £12,000 now.
Cautionary tale?
Yes, go on. I thought it might.
Well, it's not me, it's Joe. We have a contributor, Joanna Fidalgo, who has recently sold her E46 M3, which she adored. Fair to say she got quite a big bill for doing, an awful lot of very small things that needed doing.
This is the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
We were talking about other cars of that ilk, actually more expensive cars, things like an early Audi R8. And people who know about those, you can buy one for 25 grand.
Yes.
But people who know about them sort of draw breath when you mention that. Apparently what happens with those cars? The rear subframe separates from the chassis or something.
That doesn't sound good.
Ugh.
Yeah.
But there are issues with E46 M3s as well.
Yeah.
And clearly, like any reasonably exotic, high-performance car.
Of a certain age.
If
it's just been around for a while.
If something goes wrong, you can be facing a big old bill.
Yeah, and early E46 M3s are getting on for being 30 years old now.
God. Yeah.
Yeah. So, stuff does age. And it's not BMW's fault.
No.
It's just the way of all flesh, isn't it? We all get older and we all wear out. And so we shouldn't really talk about that, but too much. I think we've made that point. But get a good one.
That's the thing.
That engine is an absolute masterpiece. I think it's certainly, to me, the best engine for a road car. I would say it is better actually than the E30 engine. I would say that's the best engine that's ever been in an M3.
Yeah. Better than the V8 that followed?
Better than the
Yeah,
V8
I
that
think
followed
so.
it. Yeah. It is so characterful. It has such a fantastic range of power. Nothing else sounds like that. And this was back in the day when, M3s were still quite light. Was that the first one that you could get an SMG on, or was it the?
Yeah. Ooh. I'd have to check that. I can't remember.
It was that or the V8.
A lot of them. No, you certainly could get SMG. So there wasn't an E36 SMG.
No, I'm sure
There's no kind of auto option.
No.
Okay, so yeah, definitely the E46 then.
Yeah.
Yeah. The SMG, that robotized thing that just
ruined it. Come on, let's just say it. Sorry, anybody who's got a CSL.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's talk about the CSL, because that was the first M3 that had a real sort of head banging, quite hardcore variant, and it's a great car.
It's a great car with a not so great gearbox.
Yeah, I've driven a couple, and some gearboxes are better than others.
So the one I think you and I have both driven, I think, has the best SMG I've experienced.
Yeah, and if you're prepared to work with it and you lift off at the right time, it can be okay.
All of that. Yeah.
It can be okay.
Look me in the eye and tell me you wouldn't rather it were manual.
Yeah, yeah. You choose to have a good manual.
You would just choose to have a manual, and that to me is and also, I really, really enjoyed driving that CSL. It's 130 kilos lighter, I think, than a standard E46. It's not a sort of, a cosmetic bit of titivation and some badges. It's a proper effort they've done with it. A bit more power, quite a different car, actually. Not as different as an E30 M3 is to a 325i or anything close. But to me, it's spoilt by the gearbox. And for the money, I don't think that you get as much as that price disparity would suggest. And again, what you're paying for, actually, I think is scarcity more than anything else. Because, compared to a normal E46, they're rocking horse rare, aren't they?
Then super expensive. Yeah, they really are. 2007, E90/E92, and there was, I think, E91 or 93. I can't remember, but there was a saloon version of the V8 M3.
This should have been the best M3
that arrived in 2007.
So,
really?
if you look at it, naturally aspirated V8 4-litre engine going to 8,250 with a 6-speed manual gearbox. Come on. On paper, that's the best M3 there's ever been.
This is it. Do you remember it being a disappointment?
Yes,
when it was
absolutely.
Because I remember the reviews and really thinking, wow, these are not positive reviews.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reason I was disappointed was it scared me.
Yeah. Ooh.
And, if you come out of, particularly an E30 or an E46, and, we all spent time skidding around tracks in those things in the day. Even an E36, I mean, it may not have been a great car, but, it wasn't in any way scary. And then you get into this car and suddenly you've got to be on your toes. I can remember driving Chris Harris around Rockingham in one. I think I might have spun it or something. I just couldn't hang on to the thing. And Chris chortling away on the passenger seat as he would be. And yeah, I just didn't appreciate the fact that when you drove it in the way that you would expect a car like that begged to be driven, it just couldn't be trusted. It was twitchy. And when it went, it could go so far and then you'd be all right. But if it got past a certain point, it stayed gone.
Actually does sound quite frightening. I've driven a couple, never on track. Maybe that's the difference. 414 brake horsepower.
Yeah.
Revs well beyond 8,000.
Yeah.
Do you remember much of the GTS?
Yes, I thought it was utterly awful. Far and away the worst M car I've ever driven.
Wow.
Okay, no. An X6M is clearly worse.
Okay, but ignoring that lot.
Ignoring the cars which aren't really M cars. So, so we were talking about M3s and M5s.
But the GTS should have been, or could have been, a phenomenal car, couldn't it? Much lighter.
There is some suggestion that the car we had was, because it was very adjustable.
Yeah.
You could set it up for all sorts of things. But actually, I drove it on the road and track and hated it in both environments. It was just really annoying on the road because the ride quality was even too stiff for the track. Because on the road it was almost undrivable in terms of driving it the way you want to drive a car like that, because it was so stiff. The ride was so utterly appalling. It just really, really cheesed you off, and you just wanted to go and get out of it. And on the track, again, it would just hop and skip and ping and bounce, and yeah, it just didn't do. What was really weird was it did the rounds of all the magazines when we did our best driver's car of the year day. You know, all the magazines do them. And the opinion I seem to remember was just basically split between those who thought it was terrible and a massive crushing disappointment, like I did, and my chums at Autocar did, and we'd driven it on road and on track. And I think it was Evo who'd driven it. I think they'd only driven it on road, because I think they usually only do theirs on the road, and they thought it was the best thing since sliced bread.
Really?
And, you know, I knew and liked, as I still do today, and respected all the people who tested for them. And it was like we were driving a different car. And we have wondered to this day whether actually, because it was so adjustable, the setup of that car was just completely different for them than it was to us. But I don't know. But I can only report as I found. And yeah, the GTS I drove was, to be honest, I wish I hadn't driven it.
Wow. Well, talking of scary M3s, the one that followed, the F80 in 2014, the first turbocharged one. So back to a straight six, but twin turbo.
Yeah.
425 horsepower. This is when it's split with the M4, so it's saloon only. Yeah. That M3.
Well, we're not talking about M4s.
No. That's a different car.
Is it?
Well, for these purposes.
Okay.
So yeah, but that's an interesting point, isn't it? As of the F80 in 2014, the M3 is a saloon, and only just now an estate, a touring.
An estate.
So there's no longer.
So you call the F80 scary?
My God, I aged 5 years driving those things. It's the torque delivery. The rear axle could not handle the way the torque was dumped on it.
Yeah.
There was a real issue with body control, particularly over a yumping road. So drive over like Blakey Ridge in North Yorkshire, the North York Moors, on a cold, slightly damp day.
Yeah.
You're taking your life in your hands. Well, you're not, because you've got the systems on and they do intervene unless you're doing something really stupid. But it feels like you're taking your life in your hands. Like it's just going to spit you off the road at any time. Really, really, really unpleasant. On a dry day, once the tyres are warm, if you're a bit careful with the throttle applications, much better. But even with the paddle shift, the dual clutch gearbox, even on an upshift, you could bang in the upshift and that would be enough to upset the rear axle, and you'd have a twitch, and that would frighten the life out of you again.
And you could still buy a manual one of those, couldn't you?
Yeah, but there weren't many of them.
Yeah.
I never drove one, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I don't think I did either. I can remember doing a triple test for someone with that, a B3, an Alpina B3, and an M2. And actually, I can't remember what won, but I can remember what lost.
M3.
M3. It was actually, I think the M2. I think I probably just gave it to the M2. The M2 was so much nicer to drive than the M3.
Yeah, it would be. I said I wasn't going to talk about the M4. I lived with an M4 of that generation for 6 months.
Did that scare you too?
Yeah, it did. But only when you're really up it. The rest of the time, it's a lovely car. It really was. But when you're really chasing over a difficult road, it was a handful. But the important thing to say is they got so much better as the years went on.
Yeah.
With every sort of model year update, I'm sure they sorted out the damping, they fixed the body control, the torque delivery, everything.
Yeah.
And it became a much more drivable car. And then there was the CS that came much later on, and that was actually night and day. Nothing like as scary.
No, that was actually... It's so often the way. It's like a sort of a Black Series SLS.
Yeah.
The one that is the fastest and on paper the scariest is actually the one they finally sorted out.
Yeah,
and is actually, although it is the fastest, it's actually far and away the most reassuring, the easiest, most reassuring to drive.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting car, that first turbo M3. If you're looking at them, just get the latest one that you can, because it'll be better. Yeah, no doubt. So now, as of 2020, we're on the G80 and G81. So it's the first version of the M3 offered as a touring. Which was a big deal at the time. Still a twin turbocharged straight six. I've got a rant coming.
Oh, have you?
I can feel it brewing.
Okay, well, just before you rant,
go on.
Can I just say something about BMW's ability to do turbo installations? I think it's amazing. I think their ability to make a turbocharged engine feel and sound not turbocharged.
Yeah, you're certainly right about sound.
Yeah,
they do sound good.
Yeah, they do sound really, really good.
The engine in the M2 that I had for 6 months, which is the same as the M3 and M4 engine, just a little bit less power. Great thing.
And that was, was that a twin turbo or was that a twin scroll?
Twin turbo.
Yeah, it's not twin scroll. So an M340i has a twin scroll single turbo.
Yeah.
But the M2 and the M3 both have twin turbos.
I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
Yes, I think that is right. Yeah, no, I think that is right.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they do a bang up job with those. Anyway, forgive me. Rant away.
So, in the UK, we only get the competition M3.
Oh, I know where you're going to go. I know where you're going with this.
And so the competition is not offered at all anywhere with a manual transmission.
Yeah.
So because we only get the competition, there's no such thing as a manual M3 in this country anymore.
No. Or M4 for that matter.
Or M4 for that matter. Now, on the BMW M5 launch last month, they wheeled out a whole load of other cars that we can have a go in, including a just facelifted M3 Saloon non-competition manual. So it's a left-hand drive car. I loved it. Loved it. Less than 500 horsepower, I think. But far and away the best modern M car.
But somebody in the marketing department in Farnborough has looked at that and gone, nah.
And they say it's because when they have offered the standard car and the competition, in the UK, buyers just choose the competition. So it's not worth bringing both in. But that decision has meant that we are denied what I'm convinced is the best modern M car. So it's lighter than...
Better than your M2, than the M2 that you ran.
Yeah, it was a nicer car.
Yeah.
So I drove it back to back with the M5, which is, as we've said before, a 2.5-ton car.
Yeah.
And this is less than 1,800 kilos. So lighter by something like 700 kilograms.
At least a Caterham lighter.
Yeah. Which makes the world of difference.
In terms of fun to drive, presumably the M3 was just a completely different world to the M5.
In a totally different league.
Yeah.
Totally different league.
Yeah.
And it's that stuff that we talk about. It has feel. It has interaction. You are engaging with the car. It's not just impressive. It's rewarding as well.
That's the thing.
That's what the weight does for you. Cracking engine. It sounded really good. Really nice gear shift. Often BMW gear shifts are not the best. This is a really nice one. A better ride than the competition. The competition M3s can be quite stiff.
A bit uncompromising, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but this wasn't. It was honestly a gorgeous car. I'm starting the campaign to get BMW UK to bring in a batch of them. Sell them at the same price as the competition. That's fine.
There'll probably be all sorts of homologation issues, and
that's for them to worry about. Honestly, but there'd be a market for them. People would love them, and they'd become an instant classic. They'd become collectible immediately.
Yeah,
such a great car.
But do you not think that you're thinking about those cars as an arch enthusiast, whereas actually most people who buy those cars?
Yeah, but I'm saying bring in 100.
Yeah,
a very, very small number, just so at least.
What would you call it? The M3 Club Sport or something?
No, M3 Ti.
Oh, very good.
And we only want a 5% cut.
I think that's very reasonable.
Don't you think?
Very reasonable.
But BMW
They're
UK,
not going to do it.
The importer used to. The Ravaglia
that
we spoke about before, that was the UK importer that did that.
Yeah. Oh, it would be good, wouldn't it?
Oh, it'd be fantastic. It's not going to happen. I know it's not.
Going to happen.
But it's a shame.
Yes.
It's a shame that we are denied that car because the marketing department decided we didn't want it.
Do you think that the M3 has, I suppose all cars have, given that, actually we should talk a little bit about, this is actually sort of germane to the point I'm trying to make. I was going to ask you whether you thought that the M3 had sort of lost some of its focus and some of its purity over the years. And then suddenly the spectre of the four-wheel drive M3 Touring popped into my head. Which I guess is almost the ultimate example of this sort of almost the anti-M3 if you look at it from where it came from. That's what
I was going to say. So
the E30
started out homologation special.
Yeah.
2-door car.
Yeah.
Bespoke in many ways. Amazing engine. Bespoke engine again. And it has grown over the years into a near 2-ton saloon or estate with an auto box in this country.
4-wheel drive.
And turbos, It's really changed an awful lot in that time.
Yeah.
Is it really still the same car?
Well, is a 911 still, a 1964 911? Is that still the same car? Is it still?
I would say more so.
So would I. It's still trying to do the same job.
But I suppose the point is that an M2 sits in the space once occupied by the M3.
Completely right.
Not the E30, of course, but it's sort of E46. Maybe there's a comparison there with the M2. And the M3 has grown into sort of M5, isn't it? In some ways.
Well, I bet, but I don't know. I'd be interested to see how many generations of M5 back you have to go before you come across a car that is that sized, that is the size of a modern M3. What do you think?
I'd like to compare it to
E39?
39. Yeah,
39.
Similar sort of weight. Actually, the E39 is probably a bit lighter than today's M3. It will be.
Definitely will be.
So it really has come an awful long way in that time. It's changed a heck of a lot. It's about to change again.
Say more.
So the next M3, based on the Neue Klasse 3 Series, they say there will be an ICE version still, a petrol engine, maybe a hybrid, but there will be a petrol version.
That is encouraging.
But also a full EV one, so they're going to do both.
They're going to put an M3 badge on an EV.
It'll have 3 motors. They say it's going to be engineered to sort of drive just like the petrol car. I'm not sure quite how that's going to work.
It's going to drive just like the petrol car.
Yeah, they're really excited about it because you can do trick things with electric motors. We know that, we've discussed that.
Yeah, you can, but you can't. You can't turn a cat into a dog or a dog into a cat, can you?
It comes down to the weight again. If it's necessarily,
it comes down to the weight and the.
If it's 2.3 tons, 2.2 tons even,
Well, we know unless there has been a complete, and there might be with the new car, because as we know that this new car, the Neue Klasse that comes whenever it is, next year after next. That's meant to be a whole new rebirth of BMW in the same way as it was back in 1962. So maybe their attitudes will change. But one thing we do know at the moment, I'm afraid, is that BMW doesn't care what its cars weigh. Otherwise, the M5 wouldn't weigh. What does the M5 weigh?
2,435.
Yeah, I mean, which is how many kilograms more than the last one? It's half a ton heavier.
Yeah.
So and you've gotten your M2 weighed 1,800 kilos.
They're about 1,700 and something.
Yeah, which again is for a car like that is utterly ridiculous. So BMW don't care about weight.
Yep.
So hopefully with the new one that'll change. It's going to have to, because otherwise, an EV M3 is going to be a 2.3 ton car. And I defy even the geniuses of in Munich, their ability to make that behave like a petrol powered car. It's just not going to.
No, it's not. It's getting that feel that you have inherently in a much lighter car. Yeah, it just can't be done. I swear by it. And until someone proves it to me,
it can't be done.
That's the hill I will die on.
Because it's physics.
Yeah. There you go. That's the BMW M3.
Yes.
It is an icon, and particularly that early car, the E30. When it pulled into the car park where we were waiting the other day, and I saw the rear of it, I just immediately thought, goodness me, that is a proper car. Mm-hmm. Such a great looking thing.
And so pure and simple.
Yeah. It's a super cool car. I really enjoy driving that E30. So.
And we still, I think to be clear, we do still enjoy driving. I mean, I would say that the current generation is a better car than its predecessor.
Oh, it is.
So it's not like this is a steady a tale of steady downhill decline.
No.
All the way, because a 46 was better than a 36, and this car is better than its previous one. So I await to see where it goes next with great interest. I'm much encouraged to hear that it'll still have at least some kind of internal combustion engine in it.
Yeah.
I do worry about the weight, but who knows?
Yeah, and actually, it's worth mentioning that we did a video, didn't we, of putting the M3 Touring up against the C63, and both estates, and the M3 Touring just wiped the floor with the C63. Yeah. It is I have sort of misgivings about the ride quality in that car, but otherwise it's a very, very impressive thing.
Yeah, and also I'm afraid in that particular example it said as much about the C63 with its 2-litre 4-cylinder engine as anyway.
Enough. Okay, so that's another Icons podcast in the bag.
Yeah.
Get in touch, let us know which cars we need to be featuring as icons.
Absolutely.
And not even just cars.
Ooh.
Engines is if there's enough meat on the bone.
Or I could do an hour on a Colombo V12. You might not be able to. You might not want to.
I won't have a lot to contribute.
Okay, we could probably do an hour.
I'll wind you up and sit back.
We could probably do an hour on an air-cooled flat 6.
Yeah. Oof, blimey. Okay,
Oh, I could have so much fun with that.
we'll come back to that. Well, listen, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. And as a sign of our appreciation, we're offering you a 15% discount on the cost of subscribing to the Intercooler. Just use coupon code POD15 at checkout to get 15% off for life. Please do that. Lots of you have, and we really appreciate it. And while you're at it, just subscribe to our YouTube channel, please, or the podcast app that you're listening to. Follow the show. That really helps. Lots of you have done that too, and we appreciate that. And in return, we'll keep doing the podcast, and we'll be back again next week.
See you then.